Okay, here we go. Game 3 of the match against Mr. Knobgobbler. All right. As you may recall, I lost the second game quite badly due to him putting out Workshop, Mindstone, Soul Ring, Chrome Mox, turn 1, following it up with his commander and a bunch of other nastiness. And while I was pretty slow on mana. And this game, we're actually not playing a best of 3. We just played 3 individual games, which is why he's going first in game 3 as well, which is a bit unfortunate. But yeah, I just put up a just general single match game for people to join, and he just joined consecutive times. We didn't really organize a specific best of 3 match. Maybe we'll do that down the road. But once again, he's with Urza, and I'm going second with a hand that is not amazing due to the fact that it's only has one particular colored mana, but that's one beautiful thing about Kenrith versus a commander like Sliver Queen or Brea. You can play your commander off of just a single land, and a Tundra will allow you to give you card draw and life gain potentially to get things going on. So I do have swords. Super, super nice to have that as well as Preordained. So this is an easy keep, even though the Toxic Deluge is not particularly good against him. It would allow me to at least kill off his commander plus the construct that comes with it. But unfortunately, the game begins and he mulligans twice, which is really just an unfortunate thing. I mean, obviously, we're playing to win, but it's a new deck for him. It's a new deck for me. The data is not as good when my opponent starts with 5 cards. But he does have Time Twister in his deck, as we saw in an earlier game, and a lot of nasty things that he can't actually do. So it's not like he's completely out of it. It's going to be really, really tough for him. And it'll depend a lot on whether or not he's able to draw extra lands. Force of Will. Wow, that's just... Force of Will and Swords just kills so much of his early game. As soon as I draw that card, I imagine it's going to be pretty hard for him to get back into this one. I'm just going to run out the Grim Monolith turn 1. This threatens the ability to just play my commander turn 2, depending on what he does. And he plays Academy Ruins. Makes this interesting play of repealing his own Urza's Bauble in order to draw a card. It's quite clever, and he replays it. It also explains why he didn't sack it right away. Fact or fiction? So I'm getting a Tundra here, and I gave some thought to just running my commander into play right now, but I did see that he has Snap in his deck. He played Snap in... Which game did he play Snap? He played Snap in one of our games, and as a result of that, I was a little concerned that he might have either Snap or some other form of bounce, and if I tap all my mana and waste my whole turn to play my commander without haste, he can just snap it back to my hand, and I've lost the Grim Monolith for the foreseeable future. So I decided I'd rather just preordain this turn. I'm not really under any pressure. He's still 2 turns away from playing Urza. And on the preordain, I see a land on top and something else, which I put to the bottom, I think. All right. He was very chattery in our game. These little text messages keep popping up. So he's got Ponder. And I did actually give some thought to using Force of Will to stop this, but he does have Urza's Bauble in play, so he's got an extra card, and I kind of felt like it was probably better to defend against something like Time Twister that could really get him back into the game before I'm able to deploy my hand. And with that in mind, I decided I wanted to hang on to Force of Will, even though it meant that it might blunt his ability to get lands. He plays Crystal Vein, really another interesting card. His deck is really unique and cool. Be kind of neat to see the whole list over multiple games. Taps 3, and then he plays Winter Orb, and he says, I'm not really sure that this is correct, but it feels right. And yeah, I mean, I can see doing it. Certainly, it protects him a little bit, I guess, against me playing my commander and doing nasty things with it. But at the same time, I think that tapping out with no artifact mana in play to play Winter Orb when your opponent has only 1 land tapped is... Yeah, I think that's a little sketchy. And maybe he was just sort of giving up on the game, but regardless, it'll certainly take the teeth out of my commander, but that's not going to stop me from playing it off the Grim Monolith right now while he's completely tapped out. And even though I could have given it haste, I didn't really feel any temptation to do that. I decided that the mana was more important than dealing 5. Ancient Tomb, well, that's a good card off the top. Suddenly he's threatening his commander next turn if he draws second blue, so getting ready to activate the swords and the force. If you were to play his Urza, I would just Plowshare it the first time. I would not bother to Force of Will it, because the token is of relatively low consequence against this big creature. All right, Marsh Flats is quite nice. And smash in for 5. All right, untaps the Academy Ruins. He does not have a second blue. That is the drawback of playing with cards like this. I mean, maybe these, since he just built his deck, maybe it'll be educational and he'll see that he doesn't really need cards like Crystal Vein, that having more islands is more important. It's kind of the same lesson I actually had with my Azami deck when I first put it together. I thought, oh, I've got 14 or 15 islands in this deck. There's no way I could just not draw a double blue ever, and then I would draw all of these colorless lands that sucked, and gradually I just removed everything that didn't seem critical and everything that didn't make blue outside of, I think, Reliquary Tower, Strip Mine, and Wasteland. And the deck performed just much, much better after that. Nahiri. Very, very nice, but unfortunately it does not destroy Winter Orb. Winter Orb has to be tapped in order to kill it. So not terribly happy to see Nahiri right now, and I'm certainly not going to run it out and use most of my mana to play it. But I'm just going to continue to attack and apply pressure with this big beater. Kills a lot faster than Breya does. So then he does this interesting play. So he plays a second blue, and I'm thinking, okay, well, of course, Urza's going to come down. I'm just going to Swords it. But then he sacks the Crystal Vein, taps Ancient Tomb, and he plays Teferi's Puzzlebox. Weird. I mean, not only is it just like a weird card to see someone play at all, but very disruptive based on the way my hand is. My hand is so good and so reactive that it's kind of disastrous for him to play that. And I really had to think through all the different ways that I could interact with this play. I thought it was extremely clever, actually. First of all, I thought about going to get casting Mystical Teachings and just mana draining the Puzzlebox, and assuming that he did counter. And actually, I did fail to mention one thing. You notice that he's revealed a remand. When he sacrificed his Urza's Bauble, he pointed it at himself for some reason rather than at me, and it revealed the remand. So I know he actually has a remand in his hand, which means that I'm pretty sure whatever I do here, he's going to remand it if I try to interfere with the Puzzlebox, which kind of means that it's kind of just going to resolve, I think. So knowing that it's going to resolve, that I'm not really going to be able to fight over it, certainly by not tapping out and using all my mana under Winter Orb when he can just remand it anyway, I decide that the play is to cast Fact or Fiction, and maybe I'll flip over something really, really good, and he has to isolate 4 and 1, in which case I get 4 more cards in my hand, so that when the Puzzlebox resolves during my upkeep, I get to draw 10 or whatever, because it would be 6. Yeah, I'd be able to put 10 cards down, and I could hopefully get some fast mana and something that might even be a better hand. So that's my plan here. I'm just going to cast Fact or Fiction, sack that first, and I'm going to cast Fact or Fiction and hope to get a 4-1 split. And then my deck just coughs up mana drain anyway. I did not have to tutor for it. Pretty handy. So I'm quite curious to see actually how he's going to split this. I think this is very, very difficult. And he thinks for a little while. You can see him changing things around. He eventually goes with this, which I think is quite good split, because obviously I want the mana drain probably, but I also want mana crypt. So separating those two makes a lot of sense. The land's really good, but Tithe is sort of quasi-land. So I think this is an excellent split. And really, anytime you can get your opponent to choose the 2-pile, you've probably done it right. And in this case, I choose the 2-pile. So even though this means he gets a little guy, it doesn't really change much because of trample down the road. And I decide I'm just going to mana drain the Puzzlebox and force him to tap out to remand. And unfortunately, he's got Spell Snare. God, that's brutal. Okay, well, I'm not going to fight over the Spell Snare, since I know he has remand anyway. And now, since I'm going to be Puzzleboxed anyway, I decide that I'm just going to get I'm going to get him to tap out underneath Winter Orb. Seems to me the most sensible play here, since I'm going to lose my cards anyway. And that at least gives me a 6-card box and the opportunity to probably get some more fast mana. And he's completely tapped out, which means he's got to deal with this Mighty Threat. So there's 6 cards. Unfortunately, I drew a Talisman that's going to the bottom as well. Goodbye Swords, goodbye Force. Goodbye everybody. Interesting. Lotus Field. Remember how I talked about in the earlier game about how I almost cut this card because of how bad it was? But right now there's a Winter Orb in play, and Lotus Field is just perfect. Plus I got Shackles as well as preemption against his commander. So very happy to see both those cards. In the meantime, I'm going to hit for 5. I'm going to play the Lotus Field. Gave quite a bit of thought to what to sacrifice here, but given the fact that he has 2 artifacts in play already, plus potentially a 3rd one from his construct, I decided I'd rather keep my 3 islands in play, and that means that I'm going to sack the Forbidden Orchard and the Ancient Tomb, because let's get real, I'm just going to be untapping Lotus Field every turn anyway, so unlikely that the Tomb's going to get untapped anytime soon. So he boxes, throws 4 cards back, draws a 4th, plays a 2nd blue, And he thinks for a second, and then he elects better and passes back to me. Sends in his little 1/1. Oh man, Lotus Field's so delicious. If you guys haven't played with this card yet, I recommend giving it a try. It does amazing things. I mean, didn't they make Lotus Veil and you have to sacrifice 3 land for Lotus Veil? This one only requires 2 and it has hexproof. I mean, talk about an upgrade. Jesus. I guess Lotus Veil enters the battlefield untapped, but this thing does pretty amazing things. All right, so this whole cool hand, Shackle's not gonna be played, unfortunately. I'm gonna throw these 6 away. Come on, draw something. Double Teferi and Wasteland. So good. And Demonic Tutor. So, a number of different things I wanted to do here. I thought about just playing Teferi right away and seeing what he did, but that required me to completely tap out. It does prevent him from countering, though, and I could play the Wasteland to stop him from using Ancient Tomb, but given the fact that he gets to Puzzlebox away 3 cards, he's drawing 3 more cards, he could easily land a 4th mana, and play Urza. And that could cause some serious problems. So with that in mind, I decided I just need to make sure that he doesn't play Urza next turn, and that means Demonic Tutoring for Force of Will. And I've got Wasteland here as insurance. That's going to be 5 more points of damage. And then he makes the mistake of untapping Ancient Tomb over an island. And as soon as he does it, obviously I strip mine it during his upkeep, and he goes, "Oh man, I didn't even acknowledge the Wasteland, didn't even think about that," because he was so tunnel visioning about casting his commander. So now, barring him hitting Soul Ring or Crypt, there's no way that he can even cast. He can cast Urza on the following turn to get a construct. Not that it would stop this guy really anyway. And I've got Force of Will anyway. So he starts to tap mana, and then he plays Time Twister. Of course, I'm going to force this, because it is sort of a bit of a Hail Mary. And you'll see that he's at 20. You'll notice actually on the previous turn, when I attacked with Kenrith, I had the ability to play Bayou and pump Kenrith up to 1 extra power to hit him for a lethal commander. But he did have 2 mana untapped, and if there is a small range of things he could do, if I were to invest the counter and he had something like Snap Daze, then he would be able to return Kenrith to my hand and then daze the Force of Will. And Kenrith would come back to my hand. I'd be completely tapped out, and bad things could ensue. So that's why I didn't actually pump Kenrith to deal lethal damage last turn. I just thought that it was quite a bit safer to take this route and just kill him on the following turn. So after forcing the Time Twister and him tapping out anyway. All right, I'm gonna put all that stuff on the bottom. A bunch of junk plus Imperial Seal. But all that really matters here is that I have the ability to give trample. He assigns a blocker. This thing gains trample. And that is lethal commander damage. And the end of the match. Whew. I gotta say, Knobgobbler put up a fight. His deck is really interesting. I think it's also a work in progress, but it definitely showed some glaring deficits in this deck and gave me some interesting data about ways that I might be able to improve the early game, particularly against counter-heavy strategies. Although, I mean, I did wind up winning this game. He did double mulligan in the 3rd game, and didn't draw particularly well. He didn't draw any fast mana, but it may necessitate running. I mean, generally with these control decks, you are really vulnerable to those early ramping draws, and that often necessitates a little bit more artifact kill. I mean, we do run a fair amount. We've got Vandal Blast, Dak Faden, Vindicate, and a few others, but sometimes they just have a bunch of mana artifacts and you don't draw any way to interact, and you lose the game really, really quickly before it even really begins. So playing it with a card like Disenchant can help with that. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this series. Please post in the comments if you'd like to see more games of this Kenrith deck in action. You've only really sort of seen part of the mechanisms. Hasn't been a lot of oathing because the commander itself is so deadly. But I'm pretty excited about it. It seems like it has a lot of potential. Jury is still out on whether or not it's tier 1, but it kind of satisfies all the criteria for what makes a good commander, and I have high hopes for it. So looking forward to future games. See you guys soon.